Michigan's entire handgun purchase and registration system is now under attack in federal court. The National Rifle Association, along with several major Michigan gun rights organizations, has filed lawsuits claiming that Michigan is forcing law-abiding citizens to ask permission before exercising their constitutional right. And according to the lawsuit, the state isn't just requiring permits. It's allegedly building and maintaining a database linking gun owners to specific firearms. In other words, it has made its own gun registry. And the plaintiffs say, obviously, that is unconstitutional. Now, the question is whether the courts are going to agree. Hello, my name is James, and welcome back to the 2A Defense Network. Let's get into it. A major legal battle is now underway in Michigan where the NRA, the Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners, Michigan Gun Owners, Michigan Open Carry, and 4 individual gun owners have joined forces to challenge the state's license to purchase system. If they win, the decision could have implications far beyond Michigan and could become another major Second Amendment test case in post-Bruin era. Here is what is happening. Under Michigan law, most residents who do not already possess a Michigan concealed pistol license must first obtain what's known as a license to purchase before they can legally acquire a handgun. That means before purchasing a pistol, a citizen must first go to law enforcement, apply for permission, undergo a background check, and obtain government approval. But according to the lawsuit, the problem doesn't even stop there. The plaintiffs argue that Michigan also requires transaction information to be submitted to government authorities where that information is entered into a statewide database maintained by the Michigan State Police. The lawsuit describes this as a firearm registry system. And that's where the constitutional fight begins. The entire lawsuit is built around the Supreme Court's 2022 decision in the landmark case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. In Bruin, the Supreme Court dramatically changed the way courts evaluate gun control laws. Instead of balancing government interest against constitutional rights, the court said judges must look to America's historical tradition of firearm regulation. In simple terms, that means this. If the government wants to restrict the right to keep and bear arms, it must point to similar restrictions that existed during the nation's historical tradition. The NRA and the other plaintiffs argue that Michigan just cannot do that. They claim there's no historical tradition of requiring law-abiding citizens to obtain government permission before purchasing a handgun. And they argue there's no historical tradition supporting a statewide registration database linking specific firearms to individual citizens. The lawsuit makes several major claims. First, it argues that the license to purchase system is redundant. Federal law already requires background checks for firearm purchases from licensed dealers. The plaintiffs argue Michigan is simply adding another layer of government approval on top of an already existing system. Second, the lawsuit alleges that local authorities have discretion to deny license based on subjective assessments of future dangerousness. In other words, officials may attempt to predict whether someone could become dangerous in the future rather than focusing on whether that person is currently prohibited from owning firearms. Basically, they can pick and choose who they want to carry. The plaintiffs say this creates opportunities for arbitrary and inconsistent decisions. Third, the lawsuit claims Michigan provides insufficient procedural protections. According to the complaint, there is no meaningful statutory appeals process specifically designed to challenge denials. The plaintiffs argue that citizens can effectively be denied a constitutional right without adequate safeguards. And finally, the lawsuit attacks Michigan's firearm registration requirements, arguing that government-maintained records connecting individual citizens to specific firearms have little support in American history. This lawsuit arrives at a time when courts across the country are reevaluating firearm regulations after Bruin. Since that Supreme Court decision in 2022, challenges have been filed against magazine bans, assault weapons bans, carry restrictions, sensitive place laws, age restrictions, permit requirements, and registration system. Several courts have already struck down gun control measures after finding that states could not identify historical analogies supporting modern restrictions. Now, Michigan's handgun licensing and registration framework may face the same scrutiny. Michigan will almost certainly argue that the system serves important public safety purposes. Supporters of the law frequently point to background checks and firearm tracing capabilities as tools that help law enforcement investigate crimes. They may also argue that licensing requirements are comparable to other historically accepted regulations involving firearms. Ultimately, the court will have to decide whether those arguments satisfy the Supreme Court's Bruin framework. For now, this case is only beginning. The state will have an opportunity to respond. Both sides will present evidence and legal arguments. And depending on how the lower courts rule, this case could eventually make its way to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and potentially even the United States Supreme Court. If that happens, the outcome could affect not only Michigan gun owners, but millions of Americans living in states with similar licensing and registration requirements. So I want to know, what do you think? Should Americans be required to obtain government permission before purchasing a handgun? And do statewide firearm registration databases violate the Second Amendment? I want to know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoy Second Amendment news, legal updates, and firearm policy coverage, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications because this is a case we're going to be following very, very closely. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.